U.S. taxpayers may have unknowingly helped fund China's military rise. Your tax dollars at work. How about that? A new congressional report says Beijing exploited American-funded research, including work tied to nuclear technology, by partnering with U.S. scientists. Coming up, what the report found and how it happened. A new report out of Washington says U.S. taxpayers may have unknowingly helped fund China's military modernization and nuclear programs. Now, do you get the sense that the stewardship of U.S. citizens' tax dollars might be lacking? But I digress. Anyway, that's the conclusion of a new congressional investigation that says Beijing has been quietly exploiting partnerships with American researchers, many of them funded by the Department of Energy, to gain access to sensitive nuclear-related and advanced technologies with clear military and national security applications. Now, for years, U.S. officials have warned about Chinese espionage, cyber theft, and intellectual property theft. But this report points to something more uncomfortable. In some cases, China didn't have to steal anything. The door may already have been open. According to the report, investigators identified more than 4,000 academic papers published over the past year that involved collaboration between Department of Energy-funded scientists and Chinese researchers. Roughly half of those collaborations involved Chinese institutions tied directly to China's military or defense industrial base. And that's where the national security alarm bells start going off. The Department of Energy doesn't just fund basic science, of course. It oversees 17 national laboratories and pours hundreds of millions of dollars into research, funding everything from nuclear energy and weapons stewardship to quantum computing, materials science, and advanced physics. These are not obscure academic fields. These are technologies that sit at the core of modern military power. Investigators found that U.S. federal funds flowed to research collaborations with Chinese state-owned laboratories and universities that work directly with the People's Liberation Army. Some of those institutions are even listed in a Pentagon database of Chinese military-linked companies operating in the U.S. Sounds like somebody hasn't been doing their due diligence. In other words, American taxpayers may have been funding research that directly benefited the military buildup of the U.S.'s primary strategic competitor. Of course, after learning just a few years back that the U.S. had been funding Chinese labs involved in gain-of-function research that, in all likelihood, led to the COVID-19 pandemic, there should be no surprise that the U.S. taxpayer is also paying to upgrade the Chinese military. The report also flagged collaborations with Chinese entities linked to cyber operations and human rights abuses, raising further concerns about whether the U.S. government has been paying close enough attention to who it partners with and why. Oh, and here's a hint. The U.S. government has not been paying close enough attention. Now, to be clear, this wasn't presented as a case of rogue scientists or secret back-channel deals. Much of this collaboration happened in plain sight through academic partnerships that were approved, funded, and renewed over many years. Trolling through academia, accessing conferences, enlisting unwitting researchers and professors for academic collaboration, these are all favored tactics used by the PLA and the Chinese intel apparatus to gather intel of interest. They essentially use every tool in the tool bag when it comes to hoovering up the West's R&D and proprietary data and sensitive technology. And according to the report's authors, that's the real problem. The investigators concluded that the Department of Energy failed, over decades, to put in place basic safeguards to ensure that taxpayer-funded research didn't end up strengthening China's defense research and industrial base. There was no standardized system for assessing national security risks, limiting information sharing with other government agencies, and handling oversight of foreign research ties. As the report reads, quote, long-standing policy failures and inaction left U.S. research vulnerable to exploitation by state-directed Chinese technology transfer efforts, end quote. Well, I cannot spot the lie in that statement. Now, this investigation is part of a broader push on Capitol Hill to build a stronger firewall between American research and China's military ambitions, especially as the two countries remain locked in a long-term technological and strategic rivalry that will shape, of course, the global balance of power. Representative John Molinar of Michigan, who chairs the House Select Committee on the Chinese Communist Party, has introduced legislation aimed at blocking federal research funding from flowing to collaborations involving entities controlled by foreign adversaries. The bill passed the House, but it ultimately failed to make it into the annual defense policy package. And that's where this story gets more complicated. The proposed restrictions have faced strong opposition from scientists and university leaders, and of course their lobbyists, who argue that sweeping bans could chill legitimate research collaboration and undermine America's ability to compete globally for top scientific talent. In an October letter, more than 750 faculty members and senior university officials warned lawmakers that the U.S. is already in a global competition for researchers and innovators. They urged Congress to adopt targeted, risk-based safeguards rather than broad prohibitions that could drive talent elsewhere. So the debate now isn't whether China is trying to exploit American research. It is. It's how to stop it without crippling the very innovation ecosystem that gives the U.S. its edge. The Department of Energy has not yet responded publicly to the report or its recommendations, and China's embassy in Washington has also declined to comment. There's a surprise. But the broader takeaway here is hard to ignore. As Washington talks more openly about strategic competition with China, this report suggests the U.S. may need to spend just as much time securing its own systems as it does calling out Beijing's behavior. Because when it comes to sensitive research tied to national security, well, openness without safeguards equals vulnerability. And I believe that's a well-known scientific equation. All right, coming up after the break, talk of Western troops in Ukraine as European leaders consider a multinational force. And a chilling murder in the U.S. state of Massachusetts prompts Israeli officials to examine a possible Iranian link. I'll be right back. Hey, Mike Baker here with a great holiday opportunity from our friends at Birch Gold Group. I'm talking gold. Well, yes, I'm talking gold, of course, but I'm also talking silver, right? Because for every $5,000 you purchase between now and December 22nd, Birch Gold will send you an ounce of silver. That's right. And if you're not aware, silver happens to be up by over 60% this year. Here's the thing. When you're talking about protecting your hard-earned assets, it's important to diversify and have a hedge against uncertain times and instability. That's why I encourage you to consider buying gold from Birch Gold Group. Let Birch Gold help you convert an existing IRA or 401k into a tax-sheltered IRA in physical gold. And for every $5,000 you buy, well, you'll get an ounce of silver for your Christmas stocking or for your kid's stocking. And frankly, it's a great way to teach the kids about investing and building a smart portfolio. Just text PDB to 989-898 to claim your eligibility for this offer. Again, text PDB to 989-898 today because Birch Gold's free silver with qualifying purchase promotion, well, that ends on December 22nd, and that is right around the corner. Text PDB to 989-898. Welcome back to the PDB. As talk of securing a ceasefire continues, although without meaningful input from the invading party, European leaders are already sketching out what enforcement could look like, unveiling a far-reaching set of security commitments for Ukraine that include multinational forces and, in extreme cases, Western troops possibly confronting Russian incursions. In a joint statement released in Brussels, EU leaders in 10 European countries laid out what they described as, quote, sustained and substantial support for rebuilding Ukraine's armed forces, envisioning a peacetime military of up to 800,000 personnel. The idea, they argue, is to lock in deterrence once the fighting stops, making it far more challenging for Russia to ever attempt another invasion down the road. At the heart of the framework is a new security architecture for Ukraine. European leaders say they would help stand up multinational forces, coordinated by European partners with American support, assist Kyiv's military recovery, and strengthen security in the air and at sea. Those forces would not be confined to operating outside Ukraine and could also carry out missions inside the country. Alongside that, the plan includes a U.S.-led ceasefire monitoring mechanism with international participation designed to provide early warnings if Russia renews attacks and to ensure rapid responses to any ceasefire violations. European leaders are going further than past pledges, committing themselves to legal obligations that would require action, including military measures, if Ukraine were again subjected to armed Russian aggression. That question of enforcement moved into sharper focus this week with comments from German Chancellor Friedrich Merz, who outlined what post-ceasefire guarantees could look like in practice. Speaking to reporters, Merz said a demilitarized zone between the warring parties would be established, and Western peacekeepers could be required to repel Russian forces if the ceasefire were breached, though, as the fighting remains ongoing, such a scenario does appear to be distant. Not to mention, the Kremlin has stated repeatedly that they would not agree to any peacekeeping multinational force inside Ukraine. Merz also pointed to what he described as a notable shift in Washington's position, saying that the U.S. indicated they would protect Ukraine in the event of a ceasefire as if it were a NATO territory. He called that a, quote, remarkable new position for the U.S. in light of President Trump's America First ideology. And looking beyond the military dimension, the framework also folds in long-term commitments to Ukraine's economic recovery and reconstruction, while reiterating Europe's stance that Russia must compensate Ukraine for war-related damages. Support for Ukraine's eventual accession to the European Union is reaffirmed as part of that longer-term vision. The announcement comes as Brussels takes a parallel step on the financial front. EU ambassadors approved a procedural change that allows Russian assets to remain frozen indefinitely, which is a significant move that brings the bloc closer to potentially using those assets to fund reparations for Ukraine. Still, as longtime listeners of the PDB know, nothing related to this conflict is straightforward. Merz said there is a, quote, 50-50 chance that Europe will ultimately reach an agreement on using immobilized Russian assets to help fund Ukraine's defense. He argues the country will need substantial financial support for at least 2 more years after current EU funding expires in the new year. But all this post-war planning is contingent on achieving a ceasefire, which, of course, Russia has yet to agree to. And as mentioned, the Kremlin also continues to strongly oppose the presence of Western troops on Ukrainian soil in a post-war scenario. Moscow is still insisting on its maximalist territorial concessions from Ukraine and dismissing Western security guarantees as illegitimate, all while its military operations show no signs of slowing. Okay, shifting to the U.S., what first appeared to be a local homicide in suburban Boston is taking on a more complicated shape. Investigators are weighing whether the killing of an MIT fusion professor was connected to his work, as Israel reviews unverified intelligence that tied it to a possible foreign link. Now, the timeline itself is straightforward, even if the answers are not. Nuno Loureiro, 47 years old, died Tuesday morning at a Boston hospital after he was shot inside his Brookline home the night before. Police were called to the 3-story building Monday night after reports of gunfire in the affluent neighborhood. Loureiro was found lying inside the building's entrance, neighbors told local media. From the start, investigators treated the scene as a homicide, but while police moved quickly to secure the building, well, the clarity did not come with it. Officers arriving on scene reported shell casings scattered across the lobby floor, with bullets embedded in the wall. A forensic team was immediately requested to process the area. Beyond the physical evidence, however, the picture grew murkier. Police say they did not have a description of a shooter, and reports about a possible escape vehicle reflected confusion rather than certainty. One officer reported seeing a gray sedan driving without headlights, while other officer and witness descriptions pointed instead to a blue or black vehicle. Those conflicting accounts, of course, remain a sign of how little is known at this point. The Brookline police chief said the investigation remains, quote, active and ongoing. Well, yeah, that makes sense, adding that authorities are limiting what they share publicly in an effort to protect the integrity of the case. So far, no arrests have been made. For those inside the building, the violence unfolded suddenly. A neighbor of Loureiro's, who lives upstairs, told the Boston Globe she was lighting a menorah candle when she heard multiple gunshots. When she opened the lobby door, she found Loureiro on the ground and dialed 911 along with another neighbor. As investigators pieced together what happened, attention began to shift to who Loureiro was and what kind of work he did. He had been appointed last year to lead MIT's Plasma Science and Fusion Center, one of the institute's large laboratories, overseeing more than 250 researchers and staff and students working on the forefront of plasma physics and nuclear fusion. Prior to joining MIT in 2016, Loureiro, who was born in Portugal, studied physics in Lisbon and held a position at the Institute for Plasmas and Nuclear Fusion in that country. Now, why it's important to understand his career is because the field he specialized in is considered strategically sensitive, with implications for future energy systems and advanced technologies closely watched by governments around the world. It's that stature and nature of his research that has drawn attention beyond the U.S. Israeli officials are now examining intelligence suggesting a possible Iranian connection to the killing, though they have stressed that the assessment remains preliminary and unverified. So, why is Jerusalem suggesting a connection to the mullahs? Well, sources cited by Israeli media say the interest stems not only from Loureiro's work in fusion research, but also from past statements in which he expressed support for Israel during its 12-day war with Iran. At the same time, Israeli officials emphasize that no determinations have been made. For now, as parallel investigations unfold, investigators do remain tight-lipped. But the rare convergence of advanced scientific research, international intelligence interests, and an unsolved killing has left a growing sense that this case may not be a straightforward local homicide. And in today's Back of the Brief, new footage released in the Brown University shooting as the manhunt continues. I'll have those details when we come back. Hey, Mike Baker here. Let me ask you an important question. Do you owe $10,000 or more in credit card debt or personal loans? Well, with credit card debt at an all-time high, Debt Relief Advocates is urgently notifying consumers of debt relief now being made available designed to aid consumers who have out-of-control credit card debt. Those who qualify and enroll for this relief program may only have to pay back a fraction of what they owe. Look, this is not a bankruptcy or a debt consolidation loan. It's a relief program that credit card companies, frankly, would rather you not know about, as it could end your debt nightmare and save you lots of money. Consumers owing at least $10,000 in credit card debt or personal loans can now take advantage of this debt relief as the cost of living continues to rise. To learn what debt reduction you may qualify for, simply go online and visit DRA.com. That's DRA for Debt Relief Advocates, DRA.com. Once again, DRA.com. In today's Back of the Brief, as the Brown University shooting investigation enters its fifth day, authorities in Providence say the shooter remains at large, and the probe is now expanded to include a secondary figure seen near the primary person of interest before the attack. Police released additional surveillance images on Wednesday, showing an individual in a blue jacket with a beige hoodie, dark pants, and carrying a light-colored satchel. This second individual was reportedly seen walking in proximity to the main suspect shortly before the December 13th attack, which left, of course, 2 students dead and 9 others injured. The Providence Police Department urged the public for help identifying this person on Wednesday, asking anyone with information to contact a dedicated tip line as part of the expanded manhunt. Now, the update from the Providence Police Department comes just one day after the FBI's Boston office released new, quote, enhanced images and video of a separate primary person of interest. That suspect can be seen walking down a suburban Providence street less than 2 hours before the shooting, wearing a black mask, a beanie, and what appears to be a two-tone jacket with a black crossbody bag. It appears to be the same suspect first flagged by the FBI in grainier CCTV footage on Saturday. Now, the FBI, which issued a $50,000 reward Monday for information leading to the identification, arrest, and conviction of the shooter, describes the main suspect as approximately 5'8" with a stocky build. In a video timeline released Tuesday by the FBI, the suspect can be seen walking near the campus and at one point after the shooting, walking by responding officers. In another clip, the suspect is seen walking right next to the Barris and Holly building where the shooting occurred. Officials say the second person of interest, revealed on Wednesday, appears to cross paths with the main suspect. Video shows the individual walking toward the suspect on Benevolent Street at about 2:16 p.m., less than 2 hours before the shooting. The suspect then turns around and runs down the street out of the camera's view. We should note that the second person of interest is not seen running after the suspect, according to a Fox News analysis. So after 5 days with few answers, where does that leave the investigation? Well, frankly, more or less in the same place it was when we provided our last update Tuesday morning, though investigators do appear to be making some slight progress. While authorities admit the new images and footage do little to clarify the suspect's identity, they say it has helped investigators narrow the timeline as the manhunt continues. At a press conference on Wednesday afternoon, officials provided few additional details, noting the complex nature of the ongoing investigation. Authorities acknowledged the challenges posed by the lack of footage inside the older portion of the building where the shooting occurred, a fact that has drawn increasing criticism from members of the community and even from the White House. Brown University officials continue to urge community vigilance, but stress there is no known ongoing threat to the campus. At the press conference, officials also urged the public to avoid distributing misinformation and AI-generated content, which they say is proliferating online and complicating the public's understanding of the investigation. As a reminder, the latest updates come after a previously detained person of interest was released from custody earlier in the week. With that lead no longer viable, police say the grainy images and video clips remain the best available visual evidence of the suspect's movements on the afternoon of the attack. The Providence Police Department continues to lead the investigation, but it's an all-hands-on-deck effort. As officials continue to canvass neighborhoods near the Brown campus, review residential video, sift through hundreds of tips, and review forensic evidence, they're coordinating closely with law enforcement partners in the Rhode Island State Police, Rhode Island Attorney General's Office, the FBI, and a number of other federal agencies. Police say they don't know yet how or where the gunman exited the campus, and no firearm has, as of yet, been recovered. And that, my friends, is the President's Daily Brief for Thursday, the 18th of December. Now, if you have any questions or comments, please reach out to me at pdb@thefirsttv.com. And for an ad-free PDB experience, that's possible, just become a premium member of the President's Daily Brief by visiting pdbpremium.com. I'm Mike Baker, and I'll be back later today with the PDB Afternoon Bulletin. Until then, stay informed, stay safe, stay cool.
Hey, thanks for tuning in. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to hit that like button and leave a comment, a really positive, nice, and kind comment. That would be appreciated. And if you're not already subscribed to our channel, make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss any of our daily updates.